Welcome to the Night Seder at shul.com at the Sephardic Center, and we are learning Parashat Vayetze also from a beautiful sefer, Otzar Pelaot HaTorah. Interesting, unbelievable hidushim from an individual. Supposedly he's a businessman. His name is Zickerman, and he put together him and I guess maybe some other individuals, beautiful sefer on the Torah. Everything you're going to learn today, you probably have never heard. I guarantee you. You didn't come here. I always tell everybody, if you're going to come learn with me, I'm always looking for the interesting stuff. Why? Because I'm a businessman. And as a businessman, I'm not just looking to fill a quota of classes. I'm more interested in the learning than even the people that are coming. And so it changes the dynamics of the topics, of the interest of that sort. We're reading from Parashat Vayetze. First, before we begin, Parashat Vayetze is an interesting parashat. It's the only parasha in the Torah that has no parashiot setumot or petuchot. What does that mean? We call our weekly reading a parasha, but really it's called a seder. What does that mean? Why seder? Because in every week we have what's called parashiyot, petuchot, and stumot. You ever look in the Torah and you notice you have the amudim, the whole scroll, and you'll notice sometimes the letters are filled the whole line. Sometimes it skips and it starts in the next one. So whenever there is just a space and then there's letters on both sides of the line, that would be a parashat setuma. And if it skips to the next line, it's a parashat petucha. That's what it does. And then usually when you start one of the 5 books, they'll have 4 lines. They'll skip 4 lines and then they'll do it. So there's this parashat Vayetze is completely hidden. It's opened. It starts with a parashat setuma, which means there's a little space so you can identify where it begins. But from there until the end of the parasha, there's not one opening or closing. So whoever reads the parasha this week, he's got to know where, like if he stops, he's going to have to find the exact location. It's not going to stop at any spot. Now, why is it on this parasha and no other? What's the message for us, and what's the message that the Borei Olam was telling us when he did this? The message is that this week, our nation is born. Our nation wasn't born with Abraham. It wasn't born with Yitzhak. It was born with Yaakov. We are Bnei Yisrael. Yisrael is the name of Yaakov. And Yaakov, when the nation is starting, the nation starts with what? With him running away. Running away from what? Running away from his brother, Eisav. Eisav is trying to kill him. And later on he sends Eliphaz, his son, which is the nephew of Yaakov, and he ends up catching him. And he ends up telling him, look, my father said I have to kill you. And he says, but I don't want to because I know who you are. I know that you're really a righteous person. I know that you do good, and you taught me Torah. He said, what am I supposed to do? He says, don't worry about it. He says, I'll give you all the money that I have. I'll give you all the clothing that I have until I'm bare naked. I have nothing, no ownership of anything. And it says, Ani hashuv kamet. Somebody who's poor, he's considered like if he's dead. Sometimes it's gezerot in the shamayim where seemingly someone could do something that in the shamayim they want to kill that person. He did something of that it's really bad. And what they do in the shamayim is they sometimes have to take some money away to make him poor, to say, okay, look, we'll do this as an exchange for the life. And it happens. Sometimes a person can go from being extremely wealthy to being extremely poor. That's why the Hachamim always say, try to keep your life always in the middle. Always be humble, be in the middle. Because no one knows the Galgal Ha'olam, how it goes. But if you're in the middle, and then it ends up going, you go from here to here, it never really changes. And so there is something about being humble and being low-key that is a very, very special, staying off the radar. It's a very special thing. Yeah, and it's something that we learn. Now, there's a very famous question. So Eisav is upset. His brother ends up taking the Bechorah, he feeds him a bunch of lentil soup. And we had a whole discussion about is that what would be called a mekach ta'ut, a business decision where seemingly it was based on a false pretense. Imagine someone comes along and he's starving, and he sees you and he says, "Oh my God, I see you got some rolls of sushi here. I haven't eaten in 4 days. I need to eat." And you say, "Okay." He said, "That's a pretty nice diamond ring you got there. You want to trade 4 rolls of sushi for that diamond ring? That diamond ring is worth $150,000. Those rolls of sushi are worth a total of $26. Is that a sale that is binding according to the Torah? Could the individual end up making the sale, eat the food, and then go back to the court and say, hey, listen, I was starving, I wanted to eat. He cheated. It was a cheating. It was ona'ah there. And the answer is yes. he would have a claim. So what did Yaakov Avinu do before he sold Eisav and gave him the lentil soup Nezid Adashim? First he did, when Eisav came, he said, listen, I want those soup. He said, sell me the Bechorah. He says, okay, hold on a minute. Sit down, relax. He fed him a few loaves of bread. He gave him water. After filling him up with bread and water, he asked him, do you still want the lentil soup? He said, I still want it. He said, you still want to sell it for the Bechorah? He said, yes. He said, okay. So now that you've been filled up, you're not starving, you're not under duress anymore. Okay, now it's a kosher sale. But his brother, obviously Eisav, he reneged on it. After he realized what kind of stupid mistake he made, he reneged on it. And he got very upset to the point that he said that he wanted to kill his brother. And he said that he was going to wait till the avelut of his father in order to kill Yaakov. So there's a few reasons. Why would he have to wait till the avelut of his father? Why? Because every time a person is learning Torah, the Torah is magneh and matzleh. It protects him, it's a shadow over him, and it protects him everywhere he goes. And he knew Yaakov was constantly learning Torah and always thinking about all the hiddushim and everything, pilpul and Torah. So he said, this guy Yaakov is never going to stop learning. There's no chance I can get him to stop. The only time he will stop is when it's time to bury Yitzhak. At that point, he'll be upset. There'll be a time of crying. We'll have a gap where he will not be learning. Catch him on it. And some of the Mefarshim say, what do you mean? He could also learn what's called Hilchot Avelut. He could learn the laws of Avelut, which is also Torah, it's also Halakha. But that wouldn't work as much. Why? Because the Torah that's Magneh and Matzleh is Torah that specifically is learned with Ahava and love. Not a learning that's made out of sorrow and sadness and out of filling a quota, mitzvat anashim melumada, that they say that's the constant, just you're doing it like, God, I have to do this now. It's one that came out of love. And that learning of Hilchot Avelut will be Torah. It has, for sure, a protection, but not the same protection as a learning of Ahava. That's why you say every day, the Sfaradim say it in the Yotzir, in the morning, HaMerachem, the merciful one, Rahim na'alinu, have pity on us. V'tin b'libenu v'na, put in our heart to understand. Lahavin, lahaskil, lishmoa, to be able to learn, to listen, l'dmod, u'lamet, in order to teach, to learn, lishmor v'la'asod, to protect, to preserve. It's called divrei HaTorah, called divrei Talmud Torah be'ahava, with love. And what the last word is with love, and that's the key point, that when you learn, you have to learn to enjoy. And I tell this to everybody that learns with us, you must learn the subjects that you like. If there's a subject in the Torah that speaks to you, I don't know what it is, learn that subject. Delve into that. Obviously, you need to know halachot, which are the basic guidelines, and certain things you need to do based on halakha. But with those exceptions, after that, you want to study Gemara, go for it. You like Yerushalmi, go. You're a Zohar guy, go for it. You like to learn Chumash Rashi, good. Maybe this guy likes Nevi'im. He's a guy who likes prophets. I don't know. He likes all the stories. He likes the kings. He likes the gruesome battles of David HaMelech. Whatever you like. Maybe the guy likes Tehillim. I don't know. Whatever it is, you find the subject that you like, focus in that, and go for it. And I tell this to everybody. Don't force yourself to learn a Torah that you don't like. Force yourself to learn the Torah that speaks to you. And the more I speak with people, they always being honest at the end. You know what? I always want to know what Daniel, the prophet, said. I love Megillat said. I thought, okay, great. Learn the whole Megillah. Learn it by heart. Learn how to read it from the scroll. Learn everything. Take it to the next level. If God made your soul the one that is the Tetris piece or the puzzle piece that goes in, then go for it. What are you putting yourself under duress to do something that you didn't like? You don't have to learn from the subjects that are always being taught. You can also learn from the subjects that speak to you. And now Eisav is worried. Eisav is not worried. Yaakov is a little bit concerned. He sees Eisav wants to kill him. So his mother knows this, and his mother tells him, okay, please, I want you to go run away to Lavan's house. Go to Lavan, go to my brother, he'll take care of the situation. And my initial reaction is, how is this going to change anything? Eisav said he wants to kill him. Eisav was after to hunt him. He already sent Eliphaz to strip him down naked, so he has no assets of any kind. What was this going to help? Because those who understand a little bit of the world of the mafia and of gangs, there's something very important to know. Eisav was a gangster. He was probably the head of the mafia in Be'er Sheva. Be'er Sheva had a mafia, and that Eisav was in charge. Now, what's interesting is that Eisav also knew the laws of how the mafia works. I came from Brooklyn, New York. I was born in the 80s. I saw all the movies, I wasn't always observant. I saw the mafia movies. I used to always love those, Godfathers. And if anyone knows anything about the mafia, especially in Brooklyn, New York, and those things. There was a Genovese family, there was the Banana family, there was the Gotti family, there was all the big names. Now those guys, they had territories. You can't just go to Bay Ridge and go start shooting up because someone owed you money. Lavan was the uncle of Eisav, who was the head of the mafia in Padan Aram, Aram Naharaim. Now, now in the city of Be'er-Sheva, okay, Eisav had a stronghold over there. But the moment that he left Eretz Canaan to go Aram Naharaim, Padan Aram, right away, Eisav knew, this is going to be a problem. Because he knew, I can't go to Lavan's territory and start killing people left and right and shooting them up. I need permission. And I know Lavan's going to tell me the first thing, in my territory, I'm in charge, get the hell out of my place, leave now. And that was, now, and I'm sure Rivka understood this. Rivka was born in that house. She understood this. And so he goes to Lavan's house, and while he's in Lavan's territory, he knows that as long as he's serving and working with Lavan, he'll have that. Now, of course, Hashem was protecting him, but for the sake of the discussion of how otherwise, tell me why Eisav didn't just go there and kill him there. Why not? He could have. But when you understand these dynamics, you understand, okay, he understood what was well known, that you can't just go to another town and do whatever you want. And if he did, Lavan probably would have taken it out on Eisav before he took it out on Yaakov. So it's an interesting point that was brought out there. But, yeah, we're just beginning. Believe me, I prepared a lot of goods for tonight. Okay, so let's take a look. It says Vayetze Yaakov. We're going to look at a little bit Rashi, and then we're going to go into some interesting stuff. It says here, Vayetze Yaakov. Yaakov left mi Be'er-Sheva, from the city of Be'er-Sheva. That's where Yitzhak lived. Vayelech Haran, and he went to Haran. So it used, he left, and then he went. So two. So the simple question is, why didn't you just say, Vayelech Yaakov mi Be'er-Sheva leHaran? You added another word. And whenever there's another word in the Torah, you have to understand God wrote this book, Etzba Elohim Hi. So we have to understand that there's no wasted words. And an intelligent person will look between the lines, start trying to understand. Let's look at Rashi. Vayetze. Lo haya tzarich lechtov ela vayelech Yaakov Harana. It could have just said Vayelech Harana. It didn't even have to say Be'er-Sheva. We already knew that from the previous parasha that where he was. I don't have to tell me where the location was. We know where you're leaving from. So what was the message? Why tell me that he had to leave? Because when a righteous person leaves the place, it has an effect. It's not just a person leaving. And so what is it? When a Sadiq is in a city, hu hoda, hu ziva, hu hadara. He is the splendor, he is the light, he is that feeling, that kiddusha, that magical feeling. You know, sometimes you're with a gadol, you hang around them, and suddenly you feel something. Right. Wait, that's the Sadiq. You feel it, and you feel it. Now, he's in the city, the whole city gets that benefit. Even the Rishaim get the benefit when he's in that city. But when he leaves, Yatzam Misham, when he leaves there, Pana Hoda, Pana Ziva, Pana Dara, all those things leave with him. Vechen, Vatetze Min HaMakom, and he brings a pasuk from Ruth, Ha'amur ben Naomi veRuth, the same thing with Naomi and Ruth, that they were all Sadkaniyot, both Sadkaniyot, when they left, the same effect there. And interesting. So it says here, and it's interesting to point out this is talking about a Sadiq. It's not just talking about an individual that has a title, whether it's a Rav, or whether it's a chief rabbi or a Rabbi. It's talking about Sadiqim. This Sadiq, it's a person like this Sadiq can even be an old man that seemingly is or a young man that's simple. Someone who maybe has Kedushat Einayim, Kedushat Oznaim, Kedushat Apeh, he controls himself. So this inyan of a Sadiq is not necessarily someone that you could identify with. It could sometimes be someone you've never identified as being that person that could be. And I say that because sometimes people identify a title automatically with what a Sadiq is, and it's not the case. There's a difference between a Rav, a Debi, Talmid Hacham, a Sadiq, a Gaon. All these identifications, we today interchange them amongst everyone, but that's not how, if you look in the Sfarim, they were all classified in different ways for different people who accomplished different things in their life that they did. And this is a beautiful Rashi, but I now want to take you to level 2. Let's begin. So, when did he leave Yaakov from Be'er-Sheva? Let's figure out the calendar. Can we figure it out? B'Sefer Tiferet Yonatan. I'm reading that from Otzar Pelat Torah. Beautiful book. The book is right here. You guys can check it out. Written by this individual Zickerman. I heard he's from Brooklyn, a businessman, Talmid Hacham. The book is fantastic. If I can get to invite him to come down to here, Miami, I will bring him to come speak. This book is just fantastic. Every time I read this book, I fall in love with more and more things. You'll see why in just a minute. Okay, B'Sefer Tiferet Yonatan, this book, Tiferet Yonatan, says, Kan Diburat Machiv Vayisa Yaakov, Katav, Yaakov Avinu Yatzam Mi Be'er Sheva Be'er Pesach. That when he left the city Be'er Sheva, when was it? It was on Erev Pesach. Interesting. Erev Pesach, that would be the 14th of Nisan. B'Tfilat Arvit Shetiken Hayta Tfilat Arvit Sheler Rishon Shel Pesach. And the first tefillah that he did was the tefillah of the night of Pesach. Interesting. If you want to know which Arvit was the one that he was mitaken, that he actually instituted, it was on that night of Pesach. Uboto halayla, and it was on that night. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu Yaakov, God tells him in Bereshit Kaf Chet Tetvav, V'hina Anochi, I am going to be with Imach. I'll be with Ushmaticha Bechol Asher Telech, and I'll be with you and protect you in all the places that you go. Well, that's very pertinent to Yaakov Avinu in the situation that he is. But let's take a look further. V'hu siman lebanav. It's also a sign for his children. Why? Sheyeh oto halala shel leil Pesach leil shimurim. Like it says in Shemot Yud Bet Mem Bet. What is that? That later on we left Egypt and we needed also that protection, leil shimurim. So the protection that Yaakov got from Arvit, from that night that he did, that was the same night, the same blessing that God said, I'm protecting you, and I'm also going to protect your children on this same night. And it shouldn't be coincidence that it says that the Mashiach also, the war of Gog and Magog, or seemingly one of the three parts of the war of Gog and Magog, is going to begin on Sukkot, Simchat Torah, almost like kind of like what happened on October 7th this year. It could be that that's the start. We don't know. There's been a lot of times in history where this has come up, but this was seemingly a catastrophe which has never happened before, since the Holocaust, never since we had a country and an army, and so it could be, but it says that it's going to also complete itself on Pesach. So it's kind of interesting that Leil Shumurim will carry itself also to the inyan of the Mashiach. Let's take a look here. Let's continue. It's unbelievable stuff. Unbelievable. Let's continue. Omnam. But if we evaluate this thing I just told you, there's another book, Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, in Perek Lamed Bet, Liv, that the two goats that Yaakov brought his father when he wanted to eat, that's what Rashi brings down, that he brought him two. Why two? Because on Pesach we bring two korbanot, one for korban Pesach and one for korban Hagiga, for the Yom Tov. Vehosif od hagaon Baal Shevet Musar. That's Rabbi Eliyahu HaKohen Itamari Me'izmir, Turkey. Now, why was he called Rabbi Eliyahu HaKohen Itamari? His name was Rabbi Eliyahu Kohen, Eli Cohen. That was his name. Okay, but what? And it was from Izmir, Turkey. Now, why did they say Itamari? Because Aharon HaKohen had 4 children: Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, Itamar. What happened to Nadav and Avihu? They died. Yeah. They died. So what do you have left? Elazar, Itamar. You have only 2 families left. So all the Kohanim that descended, they have to be either from Elazar or Itamar, because Aharon didn't have any more children after the fact. So this rabbi traced his lineage. He lived a couple of hundred years, more than a couple of hundred years ago. He traced it to be back to Itamar. So he put at the end of his skin, Rabbi Eliyahu Kohen Ha-Itamari, which is very, very interesting, very nice. So he said this is the Baal Shevet Musar on it. And he says, Besifro, Minchat Eliyahu, that in Perek Lamed Gimel, Sheshama mipi zaken chacham. He heard one time, this rabbi in Izmir, he heard from an old zaken, a wise one, Shelachen lo achal Yitzhak mitzedo shel Eisav. That's why Yitzhak didn't eat from the catch of Eisav. Why? What do you mean? Why didn't he eat? Let's take a look. Mishum she'en maftirin achar Pesach Afikoman, as brought down in Pesachim Daf Kuf Yud Tet Amud Bet. What does that mean? On Pesach, even during the time of the Bet HaMikdash, you had to have the korbanot, the meat. After you had the meat, you had the Afikoman, the bread, the matzah. Right. After a person had the Afikoman, or in the time of the Bet HaMikdash, the Afikoman is keneged the korban. That's what in the time of the Bet HaMikdash they would have the meat. We don't have the meat today, so we have the Afikoman, the matzah. After they had that, are you allowed to eat anything? You can't eat on Pesach. After you eat the Afikoman, the meal is over. You can have water, even tea you're not supposed to have. So not even coffee. So on the night of Pesach, when a person has the Afikoman, the meal's over. And if it was the night of Pesach, like this is, and he served his father the two korbanot, or keneged the two korbanot. He finished eating. Is he allowed to have more food? He cannot. So what happened? Came Eisav and said, Dad, I brought you some meat. Leave aside that the Mefarshim bring down that Eisav couldn't catch any kosher animals that day, so he caught a dog, and he killed the dog and tried to serve his father a dog, which his father picked up on and realized that it wasn't even a kosher animal. Leave that aside. But he said, he can't eat anyway. He said, I just finished the meal of Pesach, and I had the Afikoman, I had the Korban. It's over. I can't eat anymore, even if I wanted to. That's why, V'zeu kavanat pasuk. That's why it says in the pasuk in Kaf Zayin Lamed Hey, Ba achicha b'mirma. Your brother came with a shrewd calculation that he knew, if he feeds me this food, nobody else tonight can feed me. I will not be able to take anything more. And he was sharp, and he says that's why if you take the word b'mirma, ola afikoman. Let's take a look if this actually works. Let me get the board here. We have our markers, and let's check this out if this actually works. Why not? We can do it. We have the markers here, and we have the board for a reason. Let's take a look here. Now it says here the word b'mirma in the pasuk equals the numerical value of afikoman. Let's take a look if it works. B'mirma equals afikoman. Let's take a look. Afikoman. Let's add it up. So you have here 2 plus 40 plus 200 plus 40 plus 5. I'll let you add it while I'll do the next one. Okay, so you have 287 here. Good, let's add this one. 1 plus 80 plus 10 plus 100 plus 6 plus 40 plus 50. What do we got here? We have 150, 90, 200. Do we have two? What do we have here? Does it work?
97 or 287? It might be 287.
Let's take a look. 190, 200, 287. It equals exactly. 287 equals 287. So when Yitzhak was telling Eisav, Ba achicha b'mirma, let's show it here. We'll show it on the video so you can see it here behind us. Look, it works. You can take a look. B'mirma, afikoman, 287, 287. So he says, Ba achicha b'mirma. Yitzhak tells Eisav, he came with mirma. Now you thought that just meant shrewdness. It does. But he said, no. He came with two things. He also served me the afikoman. I cannot eat anymore, therefore I cannot do any more blessings. I can't do the things. He ended up giving a blessing, but he said he couldn't give him the full gusto of what he wanted. He said, the meal's over. And also, there is an inyan that when you get something from a Sadiq, that you give something back almost. So you give him a meal, he gives you a blessing, he has a satisfaction, so he gives you, there is something there where there's almost like a trade, a reciprocation of some sort. And here, Yaakov came double. Remember, this is Yaakov Avinu. He's the father of our nation. He understood the tactics of his brother, knowing his shrewdness of his brother. And by the way, he was 100% right. This was all his, but he knew his brother. This is unbelievable. He says, it's a great hidush. He goes, but it doesn't fit with the original one that we said he left on Erev Pesach, because if he left on Erev Pesach, he could not have served his father the meal on the night. But either way, whenever we learn, we always learn all the opinions. So it's a beautiful opinion that we have here that we're bringing down. Okay, let's take a look. It says, let's take a look at the Rashi, and then we're going to look inside. It's in Pasuk Yod Aleph. It says the next Pasuk, Vayifka b'makom. He gets to the place, and we know that that's on Hara Moriah. Vayadin Sham, and he wants to go to sleep. Ki ba hashemesh, because the sun came. Vayikach me'avnei makom, and he takes from the stones of that place. Vayasem mera ashotav, and he puts it around his head. Vayishka b'makom ahu, and he went to sleep in that place. It says that makom here, wow, it says makom 1, 2, 3 times in the pasuk. Interesting. Let's take a look. Vayifka b'makom.
What does the makom mean?
Makom is a place. A place, yeah. Okay, vayasem mera ashotav, and he put the stones around his head. Asa'an kemin marzev saviv lerosho. He put it like a fence around his head. Why? Because, as it wrote down Bereshit Rabbah Yud Aleph, he was worried about wild animals. Don't forget, we're talking about more than 3,000 3,500 years ago on Har Moriah in Jerusalem. I saw pictures of the Har Bayit from the 1800s, where they had photos. You could see it was all desolate. Could you imagine what it looked like back then? There's no lights, no electric. Wild animals all over them. There were foxes. There were probably all different animals running around. And Yaakov, he understood. He understood that there could be animals. So what did he do? He probably, in some form, covered himself maybe in a place that was comfortable. And don't forget, if you're telling me that he left on Erev Pesach, it's still freezing cold in Jerusalem. So he put some stones, maybe to protect the wind, protect himself from everything around him. And he has that little fence around his head. And I guess he put his head, he put them all around his head, and he put his head against it, so I guess maybe he could see, he could sleep, have his head above, and then have his body cover. Now started the fights. What were the fights? Between the other. One stone said to the other, I want this righteous man to put his head on me as a stone. And then the other one said, no, I want his head under me. And they started arguing with each other. So what happened? God said, I'm going to make all the stones, the 12 stones that he put around. He didn't say here 12, but the 12 we have from another Mefarish that was 12. The 12 that are around, I'm going to make them into one. He fused all of the stones at one moment from 12 into one so that they don't complain, and that he has one solid stone around him and that they all will be happy. How did Rashi even know that this was true? You have to remember, whenever Rashi or on one Mefarish is going to give you a commentary, you got to think to yourself, how did he know that? Right. He's not making it up, and he's not getting a prophecy to give you these things. He has to figure it out from the text, either Torah, Nevi'im, Ketubim, one of the 24 books. He's got to look in the Gemara, the Midrashim. He's got to find it somewhere. You can't just pull it out. It did 12. How does he know that? Because later on in the pasuk it says Vayikach et ha'even asher sam mera ashotav. In pasuk Yud Chet, if you look down a little bit later, when you turn the page, it says Vayishkem Yaakov baboker. He woke up in the morning. Vayikach et ha'even asher sam mera ashotav, and he took the stone. Even is one, but when he went to sleep, what did it say? It said me'avneh hamakom. Avneh is plural. So what? He went to sleep with plural. He woke up with one. So they learned if he went to sleep with plural, he woke up with one. Chances are that they fused that they choose it, and then it's brought down in Masechet Hulin. This discussion. Now, Rabbi Mansur had a very good question. If that's the case, why don't you just make a pillow? If you're going out of your way, you see Yaakov Avinu, one of the Avot, he's going to sleep. He's literally taking a stone to sleep on it. And I know that Yaakov Avinu comes in the house of Yitzhak. Yitzhak is rich. Eisav is rich. They don't sleep on stones at night. They're not putting stones under their heads. They do that maybe when they go camping or maybe when they're out on the road. So why didn't God just say, okay, listen, if I'm going to do a miracle this much, he took from the 12 stones and made one solid, gorgeous pillow. And what did Rabbi Mansur teach on this? Interesting, very interesting. He said that when you have a mahloket and people are fighting, all you get is one big stone and rock. From fights, you don't get pillows. You're not going to get a comfortable pillow. These stones they fought, all you're going to get is just one big rock, which is another rock and stone that's hard. You're not going to get a pillow. Maybe if they would have made shalom and they were happy with each other, one would have said, no, you go in front of me. Maybe God would have done it. He didn't, and so that's that. Let's take a look at the Osar Pelot. What does that say here? V'hinei lehalan ketiv, and it says in the pasuk that he slept in the place, he took the stone. Lefize divrei hatiferet Yonatan, according to this book. Hanal hayadze belil rishon shel Pesach. It was on the first night of Pesach. If it was on the first night of Pesach, it would have been Yom Tov. It would have been a holiday. So v'kashe halo even asula tatela b'Shabbat u'b'Yom Tov mishum isud mukshe. He said, hold on a minute. You just told me Tiferet Yonatan that it was on the night of Pesach. If that's the case, it would have been Yom Tov. And if it's Yom Tov, you're not allowed to touch rocks on Yom Tov. It's mukseh. So you're going to tell me Yaakov Avinu, the father of our nation, went and took a stone on Yom Tov? That seemingly don't fit together. You can't tell me it's a mukseh. How did that work? It's brought down in that way. How did he carry stones on Yom Tov? Mitzvot Rabbanan, that our forefathers kept the entire Torah, even the Mitzvot Rabbanan. Now, on this, I'm going to put a star, which is not here. there is a mahloket on this, because according to the Torah, only Avraham Avinu kept the entire Torah, not Yitzhak and not Yaakov. And on Abraham it actually says in Torah, Vayishmor mitzvotai, Toratai v'chukotai. He kept everything, mitzvotai, Toratai, chukotai. It only says that on Abraham. It does not say it on Yitzhak and Yaakov. And we also know that Yaakov married 2 sisters. So there is room for leniency there. But for the sake of this discussion, we'll say it was the night of Pesach. I remember I told you we're going to always look at both sides on it. It's the night of Pesach, and how is he allowed to carry stones? Was he allowed to or not? Let's take a look. It's brought down in Chot Shabbat in Orach Hayim Siman Shin Het Seif Katan Chaf Bet. It says Sheyesh Etzal Avanim Shelo Yu Mukseh. There's actually a way that you can make stones to use on Shabbat or Yom Tov. If you do something, how would you allow them to not be Mukseh? If you set aside from before Shabbat that I'm going to take these stones and I'm going to use these stones as a paperweight or as a pillow, in the case of Yaakov, if you set them up from before, then it's no longer a rock. It gets designated as a pillow. And even though seemingly a regular stone or rock you see in the street is mukseh, this one will not be, because this is my pillow. You're not I can touch my pillow on Shabbat. So it's halakha till today. Let's say a guy is camping and he needs a pillow, and he wants to designate a big, large, comfortable stone, nice, it's rounded, not sharp edges, and he wants to use it. I don't know. He could. It's allowed. מכל מקום, אין לומר שלפני ששקעה החמה ייחד יעקב אבינו את האבנים שיהיו מייחדים לעולם בשביל ההשתמשות. He goes, either way, you can't really say this. Why not? שהרי כתב רש"י, because Rashi told us in דיבורת המתחיל כי בא השמש, ששקעה לו החמה פתאום שלא בעונתה כדי שילין שם. That when Yaakov was traveling and he got to the place of Har Moriah, the Beit HaMikdash, God wanted him to stay there that night and to sleep there. And suddenly, the sun set exceedingly fast. And we know that back in the day, being that there wasn't much ways to travel, they traveled using stars, constellations. They looked at maybe the northern star or the sun. They were able to know east, west, where things were situated. The moment the sun set, people usually didn't travel. And halakha brings down that you really shouldn't travel at night. It's better to always travel during the day. That's the more appropriate time that a person should go travel. So if you're going to tell me that he was traveling and suddenly the night came very quickly, like Rashi said, then how did he have time to prepare stones from beforehand and to designate them as a pillow? He didn't even know that he was going to sleep there. It just, boom, it set. In 1 minute, the sun set, it became dark, and he had to stay there. That even for one night, so how did he do this? How did he put these stones together? But he said, I found an answer. Nachon al-zeh mi-yididi, from my good friend, Harav Rabbi Yoshua Tzavyon, Shlita mi-Bnei Brak, so Rabbi in Bnei Brak. Hatno shel ha-Gaon Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. He was the Hatan of Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. Shahare katav Rashi, and it says in Rashi, in Pasuk Yir Aleph, she'asa'an kemin marzev saviv l'rasho kedei she'aginu alav. He made these stones like a fence around his head in order to protect him. He was worried about wild animals coming to get him. He said he can even move those stones on Shabbat and Yom Tov. Why? Because he was sleeping out in the wilderness. And in the wilderness, there could have been wild animals. And that's pikuach nefesh. If a fox is going to come and bite, it could be rabies, it could kill the person. If that was the case, it's pikuach nefesh. Even on Shabbat and even on Yom Tov, you can do it. And so it seemingly would have been okay. But wait, od yesh lomar, there's more to the story. The kevan shamlu hazal, but it's brought down in Masechet Chulin, Taf Sadi Aleph, and also in Sanhedrin, Sadi Hey, Amud Bet, both of them. Milamed shnitkabesu kol otam avanim lemakom echad. That all the stones went into one area. And they all argued, I want the righteous one to put his head on me, the stone. So Yaakov knew right away they weren't mukseh. Why? Because he saw, you see, we don't understand, we don't see when stones are talking. But Tzaddikim, they understood. We know that there were even rabbis that lived 2,000 years ago in the time of the Gemara that understood when trees would whisper to each other what they were saying. They knew sichata dekalim, of palm trees. They knew when birds would speak, they chirped. They understood from the chirp of the bird what was, and we're going to actually come up with that with the next part you'll see now. They understood it. And today, Maybe there's going to be an AI or some form of a software where they'll be able to train it. I heard they're doing something like that with the babies, where when the baby cries, from the signal of the baby, they'll be able to identify what the baby needs. I don't know if the baby's hungry, it's thirsty, if it has a dirty diaper, and of that nature. Now, so when he saw that these stones went from multiples to one, he knew right away that a miracle was being happening, and God would never make a miracle on something that was mukseh. God's not going to make a miracle for free. Because a miracle happened, and they were all, he saw that the stones were talking, or he was feeling the energy between the stones that they were saying they all wanted him. He understood that a miracle seemingly might have happened. He understood that they seemingly could not have been mukseh, because God would not make a miracle as something that was forbidden. For sure they weren't mukseh. It's brought down in Magen Abraham. So if there's, let's say, stones on a kira is like in the oven, they would put on the bottom stones. You ever seen the brick ovens sometimes where they want to make the stone, the oven hot, they put a stone inside. If you ever know, like in the masa bakery, they put a big stone inside. Why do they do that? They do that so that the stone gets the heat, and it maintains the heat within the oven to keep it hot and nice and warm. The afal pisha lo yachadam mebe'od yom mutarim letutush b'Shabbat. That those, even if you didn't set them up from before, they are allowed to be moved on Shabbat. Now, this seemingly makes even more sense. Why? Because if you tell me this was in Erev Pesach, the night of Pesach, it's still cold in Israel, especially in Jerusalem. You're on a mountain. Remember, it's cold. He's sleeping on the floor. So it was a cold night. And so it makes sense that he took from the area, maybe the stones from the oven, in order to protect himself both from the animals and also for heat. He had a little bit of a heat next to his head. And we know that when a person preserves the heat of the head, it preserves the majority of the heat of the body. That's why you wear a hat and a scarf in the winter. Not in this winter because we live in Miami, but in the winters in New York and up north you do. And so there was multiple fold. He took the stones to protect him from the animals and to protect him from the heat, to keep him nice and warm throughout the winter night or the even early spring night of the mountains of Jerusalem on Erev Pesach. And furthermore, for those who understand animals, and I love animals, I love inspecting animals, understanding the depth of. I go to the zoo all the time. I was just recently learning about giraffes. I went to go see one of the giraffes here. I wanted to see the color of the tongue. The tongue of a giraffe is purple, and I wanted, because a giraffe is kosher. So I went to go see a few of them to understand the animal, to see how they looked. I had a good time. I drove about an hour up north to Zoo Miami. It was very interesting to see it. Now, yeah, purple. Listen, when you learn, we don't see animals today. The only animals we see are sometimes the protests in the street. But unfortunately, listen, everyone has a right to protest. But unfortunately, when they go and they vandalize and they say things like that, I don't know. It's unfortunate. Now, interesting. When you put hot stones, animals don't like heat. If an animal, snake, sees smoke or fire, it gets away. And also animals, when the animals would seemingly see hot stones and feel the heat, they also would be deterred. So it was a deterrent for protection. It was also heat, and it was deterring the animals. So it makes sense. Very interesting. Nice, right? Let's go to the next pasuk. On here, Yud Aleph. He gets to the place, and he sleeps there, and Kibah Hashemish, because the sun came, he takes from the stone, he puts it behind his head, and he sleeps on that place. It says, Vayifga. Rashi tells us over there, that the path, the land connected themselves, and it shortened itself. It's called what's called Kifisat Haderech in Hebrew, where seemingly a distance of 100 miles become one step. He takes one step, he's 100 miles away. Now, there's a huge discussion amongst physicists. Albert Einstein talks about this, the connection of space and time. They're interconnected. Are they not? Is time something that we use just to measure, or is time really something that can be touched? Is it tangible? And he concludes, if I'm not wrong, if I'm not mistaken, that space and time are interconnected, which is why, according to his theory, if someone traveled at the speed of light at 186,000 miles per second, and he was traveling at that speed, everything he left behind on Earth would age, while he seemingly would be just a few minutes, and he would come back, and it could be hundreds of years later, and it could be a completely different world. And if you understand this now this was something that Yaakov Avinu was not the first one to do. Who was the first one? It was Eliezer. Eliezer, when he goes to go find for Yitzhak a wife, he finds Rivka. He tells Lavan, "Hayom yatzati, hayom bati." I left Avraham and I arrived. And seemingly it was a distance of, I think, 7 to 11 days of travel. How did he go and come back so quickly, so fast? 1, 2, 3. He used the trick that Eliezer, Eved Avraham, that he knew, and Yaakov did the same exact thing. But let's take a look. Were there other individuals in our, I wouldn't say modern times, but maybe quasi-modern times, know how to do this? Let's take a look at this Ma'aseh Nifla, wondrous act. Mikzat HaDerech im Abuha de Shmuel, with the father of Shmuel. It's talking about Shmuel the Amorah that's brought down in the Gemara. Rav and Shmuel. You see him a lot in the Gemara. Let's take a look. Tosafot. It's brought down by the Tosafot. Those were the rabbis that are on the left side. If you look in the Gemara, if you look on the Gemara, you'll see it on the left. When you go, it's actually on the right and the left, because Rashi is on the inner. But if you look on the left side of the page, you'll see it, or on the right side, on the edges, on the outer edges of a page. That's Tosafot. There were the rabbis in province. There were many rabbis part of Tosafot. Rabbeinu Yaakov, Rabbeinu Tam, he was the head of the Tosafot of them. They called him Rabbeinu Tam, but his name was actually Rabbeinu Yaakov. But they called him, they said Ish Tam, Yoshev Ohadim was Yaakov, so they called him Rabbeinu Tam. So they gave him that nickname. It says in Tosafot, in Masechet Kedushin, on Daf Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph Dibura Matchil Mai. It says brought down over there. Hiskiru Bekitzur, and a small thing, Ha'ofen Shebo Nolad Ha'amorah Shemuel. That how was Shemuel the Amorah born? What's the story behind him? Tosafot says a very interesting story. Check this out. Ki hahu avda de abua de Shmuel. There was one time a story with the father of Shemuel. Shahalach le Medinat Hayam. He went to another country over the seas, the oceans. Uba al yedei Shem v'shemesh v'holid et Shemuel. And he returned back home using the name, one of the holy names of God. And he got home, he slept with his wife that night, and Shmuel was born, and that's the end of the Tosafot. Very short, very cryptic. What does that mean? He went out, he came back. What's going on here? Ubemasot Hashas, another book brings down, Sham Siyen Shekol Sipur HaMaaseh Hazeh, the entire story over here, Shehiskiru Tosafot Bekitzur, that Tosafot brought in a very short version, in the bridge version, it's actually found in another book, Halachot Gedolot, in a much more depth. Let's take a look at it. In Sof Halachot Gitin, Vehuva Berosh, in Perek Zeh, and Siman Zayin. He says, I looked into it. Besefer Halachot Gedolot, in Sof Siman Lameted. Vehevi Sham HaMaaseh Be'orech. It brought over there the entire story. Let's take a look at what really happened. U'Maaseh Shaya Kach Haya. This is what really happened. Abuah de Shmuel, the father of Shmuel, they called him Abuah de Shmuel. You're going to see why they called him that. Halach l'schor le'midnat hayam. He went for business. He was a businessman. And he went to another country over the seas, the ocean. Shaya socher meshi. He used to sell silk. Kideita be'alkut shimoni, like it's brought down there in Shmuel Aleph dash kuf. Ra'ata oto matronita. A princess saw him. Achat shayta yodat belashon ha'afot. And she understood the languages, the chirps of the birds and what they were saying. V'tab'ato lidvar avera. And she saw Shmuel, Abuah de Shmuel, the father, and she told them, I want to be together with you tonight. Avur elef kikre kesef. And I'll give you 1,000 bullion of silver. She was rich, she was a princess. Sha'al ota Abuah de Shmuel. The father of Shmuel says, because why are you coming to me with this? You're a princess. You have access to anyone in the world. What do you want from me? Yeah, really. I'm the father of Shmuel. I'm a rabbi. He probably had, pe'ot. He had a jalabiya. He was all right. Probably learning Gemara. What are you bothering me for? Where did this come from? Yeah, really. And you're willing to not only do it, you're willing to do it and pay me? Meaning, usually, it's the other way around. The guy's going to pay her. But what's going on here? She answers him, the princess. Shamati of echad mitzafsef. I saw one of the birds chirping above you. Shemi shetizdakek lecha balayla zeh. Whoever is going to sleep with you tonight, yatz'a mimen ben hacham. from her will come a very intelligent son. There will be nobody like him in knowledge. Now it said on Shemuel the Amorah that he was both a doctor and he knew how to heal many, many people, including, if I'm not mistaken, Rav, who was his Havruta. He healed him too. And not only that, he was also very knowledgeable in the constellations and the stars, that he said he used to know the stars and constellations, how they would move, and the galaxies, Saturn, Neptune, Pluto, the moon, Mercury. He knew them very, very well, just like he knew the roads of Sura and Pumpadita, the cities in Babylon or Iraq, of Sura and Pumpadita. They say Pumpadita today is the modern day Baghdad, or maybe the old city of Baghdad, the Medina of Baghdad. Kevan, Sheshamaze Abu de Shmuel. When the father of Shemuel heard this from her, Barach mimena, he right away ran away from her. And he used the names of God, the holy names, in order to go right back home that night. Why? To sleep with his wife. And she got pregnant. Right away he went home, slept with his wife, she got pregnant, and he used the name and he went back to business. He didn't waste time. He's a businessman. I got it. You gave me the good info, I have silk to sell. I'm business is business. Let me go finish. In both scenarios, the business is business. He finished it and he went back on his thing. What afterwards, the courthouse in the city where he used to live, they heard that the father of Shemuel, the wife, got pregnant. They said, well, she's got a belly. Where did she get that belly? After maybe 3 months, she has a belly. They said, well, her husband, he went on a business trip 4 months ago. Why does she, what's going on over here? And all the ladies started saying, and the court said, something here doesn't look right. They brought her to the courthouse. They couldn't prove it because they had no proof, but they lashed her malkut. There's two types of things. There's malkut and mardut. Malkut is the oraita, mardut would be the rabbanan. So now how did they do this malkut? They used to have a leather whip, and on it strings, and they would, I guess, in different capacities on her back or in different places, and the front, they would whip her in a way that it was painful. There was a pain to it. And afterwards, what happened? This lady, she gave birth to a baby boy, the wife. And they called him Shemuel. Because when Shemuel got older, he said, when I was in the belly of my mother, when they were hitting her, I lowered my head because I felt when my mother was screaming and they were whipping her, I felt that pain in me, and I lowered my head in the womb, so I don't feel it. That they were hitting her with the laces of leather that were on the whip. And even though and even though those leather strings hit me on my head, even though I was lowering my head in the belly, one of them hit the stomach, the belly, and it hurt me, and it got me. And he said, look at my head, that mark is still there. And he would show people, look, the mark is still there on the head from when they used to hit. In the answer of the Geonim, it's brought in Sharet Teshuvah and Siman Yud Hub'at Teshuvah Mirabinu Hai Gaon. This brought down an answer for Rabbeinu Hai Gaon. The Geonim lived in like the 600 to 800 year. Why did they call this guy Abuwa de Shmuel? And the Gemara in all the stories call him the father of Shmuel. Why don't you just call him his name? What was his name? His name was Abba. So why don't you just call him that? Why don't you call him Abuwa de Shmuel? What Rabbeinu Hai Gaon say? Al pi asipur, because of the story that after Shmuel was born, Hazar Abuwa de Shmuel de Beto, the father came home and he saw his wife, and he saw that the wife gave birth to a boy. He said, no, guys, don't worry. This is mine. What do you mean it's mine? I'm not going to tell you how I got back and forth. This is my son. I already know this was from me. Ben kasherhu, and he's 100% kosher. Ubishvil ze hayu korim oto Abua de Shmuel. So his whole life they called him the father of Shemuel, to be witness and testimony to everybody. This is the father of Shemuel, not his real name, Abua de Shmuel. Lekol ki aviv haya. So unbelievable Hidushin brought down here in the Osap Pilot Torah. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen.